Hello, everyone. I'm going to give everyone a few minutes to log on. I think there's going to be a few people to say hello. Okay, let's do my little intro before we get started. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. If you're tuning in for the first time, this is the La Maison de Rouge Monday night weekly live broadcast. I'm your host, Lucy Sweetkill, one half of the duo that is La Maison de Rouge. A little bit about who we are. LMDR is dedicated to expanding the BDSM experience by discussing, educating, and informing our audiences about the intersections of kink, wellness, sexuality, spirituality, and social activism. We aim to create a safe space for discussing these topics, as well as providing an avenue for our guests to share their stories and experiences. Thank you again for joining us. Tonight, our guest is New York City-based sex witch and erotic coach. She uses ritual eroticism and conscious kink to guide her clients in healing their relationship to their sexuality and embodying their erotic power. Tonight, she'll be diving into why erotic rituals and shadow work are so important during this pandemic and isolation time, and how to use your subconscious to unlock your full potential. Please welcome, pronouns she, her, Lenore Black.
Hello. Such a lovely introduction. I'm like, oh, thank you.
Well, God, I feel like I have an art. So a little background. Lenore and I are actually really great friends. So this will also be a really fun conversation for us because, you know, we kind of talk like this all the time about...
We love talking about this.
About kink and growth and sexuality. So, you know, I think what started this, you know, what made us want to reach out to you, because you've been on our show before and your whole background, and we're just talking about, but what made us want to reach out to you again to have you on is that we've been making an effort to bring in folks to talk about very specific things that are kind of, you know, important, that we feel are quite important for right now.
Yeah.
And, you know, part of that is kind of the work you do, especially this time around intimacy, right? With ourselves, with others, during this very stressful moment where people just, you know, intimacy, sex, sexuality sort of goes out the window sometimes, right? And so we thought, you know, who is someone we want to bring on to talk about this? And, you know, Lenore being this erotic coach, we thought like, okay, let's dive in it with you. So let's start with just some of your thoughts. Like, what's your take on everything that's going on?
So it's been so interesting during this time. Like, I feel like in a lot of ways, isolation, and I'm not the only one here, like isolation has kind of faced us with some of our deepest, darkest parts of ourselves. And so, and in this way that I think, in regular society, we could kind of drown out with the background noise, right? Where it's like, we kind of know we have these shadows or these blocks or these thoughts, but it's like, I have other things to do. Like, let me go hang out with this person. Let me go have a drink, whatever. And so I feel like through isolation, it's kind of these like the background noise is gone. Like, it is just us and our demons, essentially.
All our shit.
All of our shit. Like, it is front row and center. And so it's been really interesting to me during this time, kind of as someone who likes playing with shadows, but also realizing like how much more there is always to go, right? Like I think of shadow work as this kind of like this onion that just kind of keeps like slowly revealing itself to you as the layers kind of peel back. And so I found myself in some interesting new places where it was like, you know, because like I've been doing kink and like exploring erotic fantasy through kink as also kind of this like healing modality as well, which I've talked about on here before. And so it was kind of like I saw places that I could go a lot deeper and like opportunities during this time that have been like, oh, wow, like this is actually the perfect time to be working with this stuff because there is kind of, not as much background noise happening. And I've found this actually to be like an incredibly powerful time for me, which has been really interesting. And I feel like it's been kind of this thing of really integrating all of these parts of myself and really just kind of allowing myself to just fully not do whatever I want necessarily, but I feel like in a lot of ways, like whatever held me back before no longer feels like it's holding me back. Like it's almost like now or never
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like if you're not living the life that you want to live right now, then like you should like why waste any time not doing it? So that's been kind of like a big project, I guess, for me during this time, which has been amazing. And also, yeah, just really kind of like facing these parts of myself that I wouldn't allow myself to go down.
So what are you noticing with maybe some of your, erotic coaching clients, and what are you noticing from just even friends and people that are during this time around their sexuality?
Yeah, so there's a lot coming up. I feel like anything that was under the surface before is just like popping up. And even in relationships as well. Like there's been a lot of tension with relationships, and I think, and it's also maybe that aspect of like being so close together or maybe being so far apart, right? Like I was in a relationship where my partner moved overseas, and it's like he doesn't really know when he's going to come back or like if. And so we kind of had to make the choice that it's like, this is not working for us. And so there's kind of this, everyone's kind of making these sacrifices and dealing with intimacy in a totally different way. And so that's been something that's really been coming up for people, like this kind of like spending way too much time together or not being able to spend any time together because of the circumstances. And it's been fascinating to see how community has evolved in my life through this, and kind of how important it's become. Like I kind of like, obviously we're in an amazing community together, and like I feel so held by all of my friends. Like I feel like I surround myself with really amazing people. And then during this, it was kind of just this moment of like, oh, well, now everyone's kind of gone. Like everyone was very good about checking in with me and everything. And the first month I was totally by myself. So it was kind of this moment where I felt like one of the days I was like, oh, I'm losing my fucking mind. Like I'm on the verge of losing my mind. And then I was like, good. Let's just lose it. Whatever. Like what, like what's the worst that could happen? And yeah, and I feel like kind of pushing instead of resisting and like holding on to like the way the world used to be and like why can't it be like that right now, or like what's happening, we don't even know what's happening. I just kind of like let myself totally surrender to it. And yeah, and something beautiful that came through that was just like exploring this idea of intimacy and community, and like how even in ways that I realized in my friendships I was still keeping myself very contained in this way that's like, oh, I don't really need anybody. Like I can handle being on my own. Like it's fine. I like living by myself, whatever. And then through this, I was like, oh no, like we are like community oriented creatures. And obviously there's a perfect balance, right? It's not, we all kind of have our own gauges and stuff with that. But yeah, it's just been like an intimacy through friendship, because my relationships kind of fell apart, which maybe needed to happen. But so it was kind of like, okay, I'm alone. I can't really see anybody. Like, what does intimacy look like to me now? And it's just been like, yeah, it's really become this beautiful way of like exploring intimacy through friendship in a way that I had never experienced before, and had totally kind of cut myself off of, to be honest. So it was just kind of like, I'm a loner, like I don't need anybody, I can take care of myself kind of thing. And like through this, I'm realizing like, no, like no, it really takes a village to keep it, all of us sane on some level, or like connected. And yeah, so it's like in a lot of ways, some of my friends I feel closer to than I did before.
Yeah. I definitely think, there's all these layers right now happening, especially when it comes to relationship, whether that's your relationship with the people in your lives that you're staying with or forced to be with, right? Families, partners. And then there's a relationship you have with yourself.
Yeah.
And the relationship you have with yourself has become so much more on the forefront of things for so many people right now. Like, how do I relate to myself? How do I make myself happy? What do I enjoy? Because when you can't be distracted by all these other things, like, how do I find joy and pleasure and happiness and like, even around like self-pleasure, right? Like, for some people, they don't have the privacy of it. So they kind of start to think about like, oh my God, like I don't have privacy anymore. And so I can't masturbate, right? Or they feel they can't masturbate, right? And then it makes them think about their own relation to how they pleasure themselves. And then for people, and some people are kind of doing that with partners or being a little more honest of saying like, hey babe, I want to have the bedroom to do some alone time,
Yes. Which I think is like such a like that is actually something, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is something I've learned so much throughout this process is boundaries.
Yeah.
Like in a way that I feel like it was so funny. I feel like I maybe kind of overdo. All right, you can't overdo it on sexual boundaries, but I started my journey with learning boundaries through sex. And it was nice to be able to like, hey, I actually am not really into my nipples being pinched, but you can do something like this. Or like, oh, actually, I'm not into that today, and I felt I gained all this confidence around, exercising my boundaries in a sexual situation. And then I would get into the real world and was just like, whatever, do whatever you want. Like, felt like it just like there was just incongruency there, or like it wasn't really in alignment. And so kind of through this, like it's really allowed me to like drop into myself. And so, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up in the way that it's like community and relationships and intimacy with other people and how important that is. But also like, what is your relationship to yourself? What are your boundaries? What do you really want to be doing with your life right now? Like, and not being afraid to ask for it or say no to something that you don't want to do. And also as a great exercise for respecting other people's boundaries, like with, everyone in this phase, it's like we've been in this for a while now, and people are kind of venturing out in small, different ways. And so it's like with anyone who I see, if it's like an outdoor hangout, if someone is like, I don't feel comfortable doing that, like, I'm sorry. I'm like, don't be sorry. Like, that's, like we're all on these like different negotiational places with ourselves and our health and our families, if you live with roommates or other people. So yeah, boundaries have been something that's been really nice. And also this, like this thing of like asking for exactly what I want. Because it's just like, if you, especially, if you're living with a partner and you want to have some time to self-pleasure, like if you don't ask for that space and take that space, like you're not going to get it. And
you're not going to get it.
You're not going to get it. And it's not your partner's fault, right? They're not mind readers. They don't know. And it's like, and I think it just takes, so it's kind of just been this like really nice flow of like creating space kind of from all of the noise, working through my boundaries in this kind of more abstract way, because I feel like maybe the idea of working on boundaries in actual social situations was triggering, or like it was a lot, right? Because I'm like a people pleaser. So it's kind of like, oh, whatever, yeah, I'll do the thing. I don't know. And now that I'm able to kind of like take a step back, I'm like, no, I actually don't want to do that thing. And that's fine, and so, yeah, it's been like a really beautiful process to kind of reconnect with my own boundaries, but also see how well other people are at kind of setting their own boundaries as well, and kind of like navigating within that.
So what would you say to those who are like trying to connect with their sexuality, trying to understand their sexuality while quarantining on their own and being more isolated than they usually are. Like,
yeah.
how, because there are a lot of people who just aren't feeling it, right? They're just like, oh, I'm totally stressed out. I'm just not feeling sexual. I'm not feeling anything. And like, what would you say to those who are like trying to tap back into that part of themselves for themselves?
Yep. Okay, so I've been thinking a lot about this too. And I feel like it's important, and I feel like you touched on it already, but it's important to know that it's like every day is different, especially in this kind of thing. Like, I feel like I've been incredibly fortunate throughout this time and things have been really good for me, but that doesn't mean that I don't have my days where I'm just like, I can't fucking get out of bed today. Like, I can't look at the news. Like, everything is falling apart. Like, it just kind of feels like everything's crumbling around you. And so it's like we have our own energy and then we have the collective energy. And right now the collective energy is very intense, very scattered. So yeah, it's been fun to kind of, I feel like, rewire my brain. Like, that's been something that I've been playing with. And especially in regards to like self-pleasure, I feel like, especially if you started masturbating when you were really young, you kind of have these very specific ways that you do things and these very specific ways that you view pleasure. And for me, it was like I started masturbating when I was 5. So I just like, I had like my first sexual fantasy was like a volcano erupting because I didn't even know like what sex was, but I just was like, oh, there's this thing that's building up and then it feels good and it's over. So like, oh, that's a volcano. So and so that pattern has been like very hardwired into me. That's like, if you're stressed out, if you want to escape, if you need like an energy release, like just go have an orgasm and that's great. And so kind of something I've been playing with is like, it started to feel a little empty to me after a while. And it's not that there's anything wrong with that either, right? Like, orgasms are great no matter what, no matter what method you use to get there. But yeah, something that's been, how do I want to say it? That it's like a spectrum, right? So it's like on one end of the spectrum, you have like the stress nuts, the orgasms where you're just like, everything's happening. I just need to like release this energy and be done with it. But then also playing with all the other ends of spectrum as well, that it's like, what if I just laid in bed for 20 minutes and touched myself in the way that I want to be touched without an orgasm?
Yeah.
And then and then if you're kinky, right, you can add another level where it's like, I like to be like, you're not allowed to have an orgasm. You just have to touch yourself and like you can. And so I'm like doming myself in my head, like, you don't even get an orgasm, like you can't do it. And like, then all of a sudden by the end of it, I'm like, oh my God, I want to come so bad. And it's like this amazing, then usually I'll let myself come. And it's this like amazing, expansive, like it just feels like there's layers rippling through my body where I'm like, oh shit, like if I just, cozied up with my vibrator, it wouldn't have felt the same. And so kind of like exploring your range of pleasure.
Yeah.
And also exploring your range of pleasure outside of physical stimulation too. Like, what feels like, I've been starting to like, food has always been kind of a thing for me. Like, I'm not big into cooking, so I kind of eat takeout all the time and I kind of feel shame about it. And it's just this kind of like cycle. And so now when I'm at the grocery store thinking about what I want to eat, I'm like, what feels pleasurable to eat? Like, what feels good? Whereas before it was kind of like, oh, I'm running out of time. What's the easiest? Or like, I guess that's the cheapest thing out there. That's good. It was just kind of like this afterthought. And so I feel like bringing that intention of like, what feels pleasurable right now? Like, what feels good to eat? What do I want to eat? And it's like, all of a sudden I'm not worrying so much about like, oh, am I going to gain weight? Or like, oh, I don't, this wasn't good for me or whatever. Like, it's just like, oh no, this was like pleasurable in the moment. And so, yeah, kind of like connecting to the spectrum of pleasure, like mentally, physically, and kind of taking orgasm maybe out of the picture, just for, not that you can't have an orgasm, but just kind of experimenting for science, right? Just seeing what could happen.
I totally agree. Like, that's been you know, when you take away being able to see somebody, especially those who are used to seeing their dominant, or used to seeing their provider or whichever, and that no longer exists, it's really a time to explore yourself and your orgasm, not just being this thing of for release. I'm horny, I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna come, right? Like to actually take time and enjoy it, take time to savor it.
Yeah.
To discover, explore, savor, maybe, you know, edge yourself for a few days or something like that.
Yes. Oh my God. Edging. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that has been like one of my favorite quarantine.
Yeah. And just like having these, you know, playful moments with yourself, and discovering all the little things that, you know, stimulate you, that don't need to always be so orgasm focused too.
Yes.
But it also can be, you know, maybe you have a free day and you're off and you want to give yourself like 15 orgasms that day. You know, maybe it's an endurance game, right?
Yes.
Of like, and that is good too. But like, I think that's the thing, is like, we sort of, you know, there's so many people who are like, I'm going to work on my cooking skills and explore with cooking and explore with food. But we have to do that with our sexuality as well.
I'm like, the first thought that came into my head, I'm like, if you can make sourdough, like you can expand your capacity for pleasure. Like it's way easier.
Very true. Like if you're just like, how many different breads can I make? You know, how many that's what can I make? You can take that time to really like tap into, and we think that that's like a better way to spend our time sometimes.
Yes.
To add quality into our sexuality compared to quantity, right?
Yes.
Like what is the quality of it?
And also not being afraid to prioritize it either. Like that's something that I think, and it was maybe something that wasn't immediately known to me, right? Like this first kind of came to me when I was in a relationship where I was like living with my partner, and you know, everyone's like, oh, you know, you live with someone for too long, you have less sex. And I'm like, not me. I'm a sex goddess. This is what I do. Like, whatever, that might be your problem, but it's not mine. And like, guess what? We lived together for 1.5 years, and it just went kind of like, And so I was just like, okay, what are we going to do about this? You know, and there's also this feeling of, all right, wait, I don't need to go there yet. Let's stick on this. So yeah, I was just like, what are we going to do about this? And so we started scheduling time to have sex. And it was so much fun. And it was like kind of one of those things that became like a non-negotiable for us in that way. That was like, okay, we're setting this time, you know, and it's like, and there were still moments where I'm like, you know, I'm not super horny right now, but it doesn't mean that I couldn't be convinced, right? And so it made things very playful, and to have us kind of set this container for this experience. And it's funny because I feel like a lot of people are like, my God, if you're scheduling sex, like that's the death of a relationship.
No,
like, no, it's the best thing ever.
Well, and that's the thing, is we have all these assumptions, right? And beliefs, like it has to be spontaneous. It's not real. It's not spontaneous. I was like, you know what? My vagina does not work in that way. Spontaneous is usually bad for her.
Spontaneous is triggering, like, no.
Like, you know, because there are times like of the month where I'm just like, I know I'm just going to feel a certain way. And I know other times, like I'm going to feel more like, you know, this and that. And so this like idea, you know, I feel like that's a man's idea. It's only real spontaneous. And I'm just like, no, you know what? My girl has a cycle, and she has things that she needs to do. And
there's a lot happening here.
There are times she does not like anything near her. So it's spontaneous bullshit.
Well, and then relating that to self-pleasure as well, right? We think that it's just like, it's supposed to just happen, and like it's going to be like, you know, I feel like we always kind of look at pleasure as this kind of like other thing. It's like, how do I get to over there? Like I see maybe some people are over there. Like I have maybe experienced it a few times. Like, how do I get over there? And really it's just been like making time for it, like scheduling it in. And it's like, and it becomes this like non-negotiable thing. And then you can have fun with it, right? Like I like doing like orgasmic manifestation stuff. So it's like, I'm like, yeah, I'm masturbating and I'm fucking calling in money and it feels good and I'm connecting to my body. And I'm like, I have that in my calendar as to like do it now. And do I think it makes it any less potent that I'm like scheduling it in? Like, no, because then it's for sure gonna happen. Like, it's like, I know that it's prioritized, it's set. So it's almost kind of this like taboo of like, oh, well, don't force yourself into it. But it's like in these moments, like, I don't think it's kind of a bad thing to be like, no, I'm going to do this. And like, I need to do this for myself.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, you know, sometimes you schedule self-care days where you have the intention, right? Of like, this is a me day. I'm going to do my stuff. But like, I think it is important to, you know, we have crazy lives. We're not, but it's kind of like, it really does say, you know what, I'm going to take this time to connect with my body, with my sexuality. I'm making it a priority. And I'm going to allow myself to feel. So even if I don't feel like it in the moment, almost like sometimes I don't feel like working out, but is it good for me to get my body working?
Yes. That is a perfect, yes.
Yeah. And then once you start, you're like, okay, I can get into this. You know what I mean? And then you're usually thankful afterwards. Like, of course, it's like, you know, you, again, if you have a partner and you schedule it out, and let's say you're not feeling it, it's not about forcing it, but it's about, okay, well, I need you to seduce me tonight because I need a little you know?
Yes. Yeah. And that's also a whole other tangent I could go on with, like the idea that, like that we're always going to be like hot, wet, ready, you know, 24 or if we're not, then that means like, no, we shouldn't be having sex. And I think that's kind of the fun place to play in. And they're like, of course, if your body's telling you no, then say no. But if your body's just like, I don't know, maybe, then it's like, okay, we'll kind of play with that and like see, how can you seduce me? And it becomes more of this connected experience with your partner or yourself. You know, seducing yourself, right? Like you can do that too. And so, it's just this kind of way to play with it a little bit.
Yeah, because I really do believe we sometimes get into these physical habits, just like working out, where we're then, because we've done it so long, we almost kind of like, I guess if I'm, you know, like, you know, you kind of feel disconnected from your body, and then you do that long enough, you're just going to continue to feel disconnected from your body. But if you make a priority to connect with your body, you can kind of tap into that and continue to connect with your body at different moments. And I think it's important of making time, like the self-care time, the time we schedule out to work on our mental health with a therapist, the time we schedule out to work out our physical body, the time we schedule out to like have like a massage or a little break, right? Or even the time we schedule out to hang out with friends or do a phone call. Like those are all these little things that we schedule out that we have no issues doing, but all of a sudden sex has to be the spontaneous thing.
Oh my God, yes.
You have to be, you know, and if you're with a partner, then it's like you guys have to spontaneously be at the right time together as if you guys are the same being, you know? Like,
and then especially add like a global crisis on top of it. And it's like,
well, I'm horny. Why aren't you horny at this 1:30 a.m. random moment that I am horny? Should, you know, it's like, what the fuck do you expect?
Yeah. And it's also with kind of like that perfect analogy of like working out or going to therapy. Like, I feel like we go into these situations, right? It's like you work out. If you haven't, let's say you've never worked out or it's been a long time, your whole fucking body is sore the next day. You feel like you've had an expansion and like, you know that you've done something and like your body's like, wow, that was a lot. And like, that's fine. Like, it's okay to just kind of know that like progress with this is going to be slow, but it is a muscle that you work over time and it gets so much better. And yeah, so just kind of playing with that idea of like orgasm maybe not being like my main focus of whatever I want to do, and also being comfortable too, like something I've gotten really comfortable with my partners is just being like, hey, it's okay, I don't need to come today. Like, I actually feel really nice, just like maybe with all the noise in my head or like the world maybe falling apart, is like orgasm is just not going to come some days, but that doesn't mean I don't want to physically connect in some way, penetration or not. And so that's been really nice and really good to just be like, hey, I don't really want to have an orgasm, but like I want to keep doing this until we don't want to do it anymore. And that feels good.
Yeah, it's just tapping into pleasure, right?
Yes.
Like, an orgasm does not mean pleasure. There's so many ways of pleasure. And like, I think that's like what you were saying about, you haven't worked out a lot and then you do it and your body's like, what the fuck did you do to me, right?
Yeah.
And that's not a bad sign. It's just getting back into the groove. And I think that's the same thing with doing therapy for the first time, talk therapy, any of that, where people are just like, this shit is being trudged up. And so you're like, I thought this is supposed to make me feel better. And I'm just crying the whole time. That's part of it, right?
Yes. Yes.
So like breakthroughs are hard and they can be very emotional, and like tapping. And I think when you haven't had a good relationship with your body and your sexuality, there is going to be shame that comes up. There is going to be guilt that might come up. Like, why am I taking this time? Or why am I masturbating when my partner and I haven't had sex in a while?
Yeah.
Like, that stuff is going to come up, and that's telling you stuff to work on, right? Because my partner, because sometimes I don't want to always have an intimate interaction with my partner. Sometimes I want to have me time. I want loose time, right? I want to like think my own thoughts, take my own time, use my own toys, do it the way I want to do it, and not think of anybody else but me, right? Doesn't mean I don't value my intimate interactions with my partner. It's just, it's a different form of pleasure, right? It's just a different form.
And you're just increasing your capacity for it.
And you're just having more options, and you just having more options is always good. So like,
exactly.
And being able to talk about that, like I was gone all day and I was working, and my partner was just like, babe, I masturbated today. And I was like, how was it? And he was like, it was really good. And I was just like, cool, And then like we schedule intimate time together. And then, because those things are important, because I'm crazy busy, he's crazy busy. And you just have to make time for that stuff and work it in. And like when you're by yourself, and if this is like very new for you, because you and I are someone whose sex has been a big part of sex and sexuality, and the conversation around it is a big part of our life, so it's easier to talk about. But for those people starting this path, it may get uncomfortable, and you may not know, and you might be like, oh, do I want to do this? And you might feel weird, and then you might try something and you might like it one day, but then you might not like it another day. It's okay. It's part of the process, right?
Yes, totally. And actually that reminds me of something else I've been kind of enjoying in quarantine that I thought I would, like, it was kind of an accidental discovery. Like, I'm, obviously super kinky person, and kind of when, sheltering in place by myself and realizing like all the barriers that are out now with meeting people, I was like, fuck, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to get my kinks fed? And so I feel like a lot of kinky people right now who can't spend time around other people are like, how can I provide this for myself? And so I've been having so much fun playing with kink on my own. And it's like something that, and it's kind of talking about going back to the pleasure conversation as well, where it's like we maybe think that our partners sometimes are the ones that have to give us pleasure. And like, oh, I can't have it without them, or like I need it in this way. And so that's been really fun, just kind of like exploring ways. And definitely it's like lots of mental kinkiness, right? Physical kink is a little tougher right now, but there's there's still ways that you can play with it. And so that's been something that's been really fun for me. Like, yeah, I feel like the edging was
Yeah.
like a way for me to be like really kinky, but like not like without like kinky for myself, and kind of even also playing like both roles, like in that way, like I'm the dominant and I'm the submissive, and I'm like listening to myself, and I'm just having this whole day of like edging, and it's like fun and perverted, and I'm like telling myself like, no, you can't come, and then I'm just like, that just makes me want to come even more. And so it's been really fun to kind of play with like fantasy and like tease and denial and these other ways that like, yeah, also increasing like my capacity for kink and like what that looks like and what the spectrum is.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been fun.
I really love like erotica and either listening to audio or reading erotica. And like you can get so creative with things on your own too, like setting a timer where you're only allowed to play with yourself and touch yourself for 20 minutes.
Yes.
You know? And then you have to not for the next 3 hours. And then you can have maybe 10 minutes or something.
Yeah.
And it's like an ongoing game you can do with yourself and not be so reliant and dependent on other people to bring you pleasure.
Totally. And it's also increased my like vocabulary when it comes to kink as well. Like now I know that I have like a hard tease and denial thing. Like I'm like, oh wow, I love that actually like way more than I thought I would. And then it's like now in a sexual situation, because I've played with it so much on my own first, I'm just like, hey, this is what I like. This is how you do it. These are the words you use. This is the time intervals. Like, you know, you just be like, maybe I'm like topping from the bottom in that aspect, but I'm just like, this is what I like. Let's play with this. So it feels like by kind of getting this vocabulary with myself and kind of exploring these kinks with myself, then when I am in a situation, I'm like, oh yeah, that's how I want it. This is what I want to, this is the name that I want to be called. This is the thing that I want to do. And it's just been super clear.
Yeah, I think this is really a great opportunity, as stressful as this time has been. It's a really great opportunity for many people to connect with themselves sexually and really work through their things, right? Really work through like what they enjoy, even keeping like a fantasy journal for yourself.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah. And just like writing those things down and exploring those things and getting to know your body and getting to know what you like, and not just rely, you know, and a big part of it is maybe not always rely on porn and just really connect with yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and see where your imagination can take you, or try using something else that's different than porn, such as like maybe read an erotica or listen to some erotic audio or something like that. And like, it's a great opportunity to explore that a little more, because I know a lot of people are filling up their time with just watching content, right? Just watching movies, watching shows, reading
scrolling
books,
on Instagram.
and it's great. But like, there's also other ways you can use this time to like get to know yourself better. Explore with yourself sexually so that you're able to communicate that. Because I think in our line of work, both you and I, our line of works both exist because so many people have such trouble communicating to other people and to themselves about their own sexuality. And this is a prime time to get better acquainted with that. And it's like, granted, you know, like hopefully our business doesn't go out. I think everybody will struggle with sex because we seem to be hiding more and more around sex, because things are being more and more censored to another degree I haven't seen in such a long time. But like, you know, like so Lenore, some of the things that we've talked about before, you know, something that you offer your coaching clients is like bringing in, you know, sexual rituals in somebody's life. So can you expand upon some sexual rituals that you feel are good for people to kind of bring in?
Yeah. So, okay. So one that's just like the easiest, shortest, and actually it's like anybody that works with me, like I have them do this. And I do it every day, or like I try to. It's not, you don't have to do it every single day, but yeah, so one of my favorite practices is just super simple. Wake up in the morning, let your dogs out, do whatever you need to do, and then just put on a song and dance for one song. And have it just be like a playlist that you already have set up. So, because before I was like, then you wake up and you're like, oh, I don't know, what vibe am I feeling today? Like, what song? And then you start being like, and then you're like scrolling for 30 minutes and you totally lost it. Yeah. But so I already have like a playlist that's like, you like all the songs on there, no matter what, and just let yourself move. And it doesn't have to be sexy. If anything, I find that it's incredibly unsexy most of the time. Like, it's very like, I'm like, oh, I don't want to be doing this. This feels uncomfortable. Like, I would rather be in bed. And then by the end of the song, then all of a sudden I'm like grooving and like feeling, and I'm like moving my hips and like feeling really good. And so that's just like as simple as like, it's not so much an erotic ritual as it is a ritual that helps you connect with your erotic energy. Like, and almost I think, yeah, maybe like kind of tying it back to everything, where taking out the orgasm, like taking out the erotic sometimes, and just connecting to your body in this way that's just like letting it express itself and move is just like so profound. And then what's funny is like, yeah, okay, maybe you do it 4 days in a row. Then you wake up one day and you're like, I don't feel like it today. And then maybe 2 p.m. rolls around and you're like, why the fuck am I filled with anxiety right now? Why do I feel so weird? And it's like, oh, I didn't do that thing that has made me feel really good. So it's almost like when you don't do it, you notice how like good you feel when you do it. So that's one of my like super simple, like very easy. If I could recommend like everybody everywhere doing that, I totally would. And then something else that I've been playing with a lot, and this kind of goes back into like the conscious kink kind of ritual therapy. I don't know, it's like kind of blending in all of these things, but just like really playing with fantasy as therapy. And that it's like, it doesn't have to be, you know, I think a lot of times we think that, how do I want to say this? Like kinks, like, okay, like if it's kinky, this has to be like my sexual fantasy that I'm into. I have to have an orgasm. Like, again, it's that like channel that we've walked through many, many times. Yeah. But kind of what I've been playing with is like, what are some weird, maybe not weird, right? What are some blocks that I have in my life? What are some things that I would like to experience, maybe based off of some other things that have happened to me? So like a few of them, something that I really kind of indulged this quarantine was, so I'm definitely into like the daddy little girl role play. And that's been something I've talked about before as being like really healing to me as someone who is like a childhood sexual trauma survivor. And then as I've gotten older, the fantasy kind of took a very interesting turn, where it was like, so I was, you know, very comfortable being like the little one, and that felt good. And then as, you know, the years evolved, I started finding myself being attracted to like younger people. And I was like, oh, this doesn't feel good. Like, I want to be baby. Like, I don't want to be the creepy dad. Like, that's not my vibe. And so I like really, really resisted it for a long time and was like, oh, that's just too fucked up. I can't do that. And also it like kind of related to my trauma as well. Like, I'm like, I don't want to become my abuser. Like, that's not the whole point of healing this, right? Yeah. And so then had this opportunity to explore with someone that was younger than me, really emotionally mature, very cool. And so then I was kind of like, fuck it, let's just try this and see what happens. And it was one of the most amazing, expansive, mind-blowing experiences. And it felt like in this way that I was just giving myself therapy. It was like kind of, I always think of, what is it, like kinky, erotic, immersive theater experience, where I'm just like, oh, I'm connecting to this like really, and kind of going back to the subconscious and these things that we bury, like I'm connecting with this really buried part of me that even me as a kink and sex educator is very like, oh, nothing bothers me. Like, I'm so kinky, I'm fine. And then there's still things that I think of that I'm like, ooh, that feels a little edgy. Like, that doesn't feel good for me. And so by allowing myself to kind of explore this and just be like, you know what, everyone is parenting, you're doing this the right way. And in that way, it was like, I also got to kind of shift the narrative of my story, right? Like my
Yeah.
abuser was this like cold, mean fucking person. And I got to be like really loving and warm and just like, oh, like I can be daddy or mommy or whatever and be this like, give this like really loving energy,
Yeah.
which is the energy that I never got in that situation. And so it just felt like this incredibly like full circle situation where I was just like, whoa.
Totally. I mean, it really makes sense that that evolution, like at first you're just like, okay, this is too close. Like I'm starting my healing journey around this specific situation and thing, right? And so you're used to playing kind of one role and it allowed you to like break through that role, right?
Yeah.
But then like, you know, I think part of that healing journey is almost kind of seeing the other side that
Totally.
that triggers you, right? And being able to like take that role and being like, wait, I actually have control of this role and I can be what I want to be in it. And this can be really healing for me. Not meaning that you don't want to do the baby girl thing anymore and only be a daddy, but understand that you could be any part of that and that you have the power to control both of those parts with other people in a consenting manner, in a safe space manner. And like, in a way, like that's a really amazing evolution, right?
And I wouldn't, and like you said, I wouldn't have gotten there without first kind of exploring like the baby girl side of things and like doing, even it's been like 6 years that I've been into this, like in this role that's like, yes. So it can take a long time, but it's just like, I also think that just being really open to like the way that our fantasies and desires kind of evolve and change over time. And like, what am I really craving in my life at this time? And it was like, I found that I actually wanted to be this kind of nurturing person for somebody else. And that I got like a lot of value and it just made me feel really good and like also horny, which is great. But like it felt like so much deeper than that. So it's like, oh, I'm engaging in this fantasy. Like, yeah, it's hot and amazing and I'm getting off, but also I feel like I'm like changing my life right now by accepting this part of myself and like letting me just kind of just do what I want and not feel as much shame about it or just like, ooh, that's too edgy.
Yeah. I think also like you've been priming yourself for that, right? Doing the work, exploring. And so these things come at a right place and time, right? It's almost like there was an opportunity because all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but like obviously the work we do open up doors for us. And are we ready to walk through the doors? The question, right? Yes. And so you met this person, you were at that mental space with doing work on this, but then you were ready to walk through that door with this opportunity that came. I really believe all of us are always presented with millions of opportunities. It's more about, are we ready to walk through that door?
Oh yeah, that's beautiful. Yes, that is so true. And a lot of times we aren't, and that's fine.
And that's fine.
But like more knowing when,
and knowing when, and giving yourself like, and also I think a big part of that is, do we choose not to walk through doors out of a place of fear and out of a place of fear or anger, or are we choosing not to walk through the door out of love for ourselves and saying, you know what, that's not an opportunity I want to go through.
Yeah, like kind of deciphering like resistance versus boundaries, right? Like, like where is an edge that you can kind of lean into? And honestly, I feel like I'm like, I love being triggered because every time I am, it's just like I learn so much about myself in the process. And that it's not to say that like bulldoze over your boundaries, like trigger yourself all the time by any means, but know when something is scratching you, know when to kind of like inch towards it a little bit more and very slowly. Like it doesn't, this fantasy had been a thing for a while, but it was just like I was very slowly inching my way towards it because I was still just like, I don't know, this feels pretty edgy for me. And but it wasn't like, but yeah, being able to decipher like a hard no versus like I'm intrigued, but I'm also scared.
Yeah.
And like that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like the thing with triggers, right? Like this has been, I feel like we've talked about this like hot topic, right? Triggers, boundaries, all of this stuff. And and there's a lot of talk around, you know, and maybe this is going to be very controversial, what I'm going to say, but there's so much talk around like, don't trigger me, don't cross my boundaries. So, you know, this is it. Instead of kind of seeing it as like triggers can also tell us things that we want to work on, right?
Yes.
Where is it coming from? What's behind it? You know, how can we work through it? How can we figure it out? Because I don't want to live my life in a place where I feel triggered by everything and everything is about my, you know, my problems and the things that happened to me. I don't want my past and my trauma dictating my future, right?
Yeah, because you don't have control over it. By that point, you've already lost control.
Yeah, and instead of saying like, okay, this thing is triggering me, what is it saying? You know, I'm going to stop to really think about what is it saying? Where's the fear coming from? Where's the emotions coming from? And what do I want to learn from it? How do I want to shift with it? What do I want? How do I want to? And am I choosing not to either engage, or am I choosing to engage based off real love and compassion and understanding of myself? Or am I choosing to engage or not engage because of fear, right? Like this person triggered me, so I don't want to engage with them. Compared to being like, I'm just choosing not to engage with this person or engage in this thing because I truly don't like this thing, compared to I'm not doing it because I'm scared, you know?
And just having that conversation with yourself, like checking in and just being like, and it's totally fine to check in with a trigger and be like, yeah, this is just no. Like, it does not feel good. I'm not going to freaking do it. And like, it was funny. Yesterday, I went rock climbing for the first time in my life. And I'm like scared of heights. And I've literally never had a desire to do this ever. So I was just like, And it's, you know, this person that I'm hanging out with was like, come on, just try it. It'll be cool. And I'm like, no, I don't really want to do this. My body is telling me no. My body has told me no for a long time. But then I was like, okay, well, I'll humor you. I'll try the thing. I'll put the outfit on, whatever. And so I got there. I get all the shit on, and I'm faced with this like giant ass rock, and something came over me, and I was just like, I'm gonna fucking climb this rock. And I did it, and like I loved it. Like it was crazy. And it was one of those things where like I love talking about this too, because you know, there's so much out there. And like I subscribe to this too, as like your body has wisdom. Listen to your body, but your body's not always correct. Your body's also kind of going through its own triggers and fears and things, you know. It's
trying to keep you safe, right? Rocks means you fall off and die. So.
Exactly. It's like, why would you want to do that? Don't do it. And then it was just like, oh, this is so like, after I did it, and that doesn't mean that like I got to the top, right? And then I looked down and I'm like, holy fuck, it's really high up. Like now I have to get down. And then I was like shaking and crying, and it was actually this like amazing. And then I got down and I was just like, oh, like I feel so good and like so alive. And I was so happy that I pushed myself to do it.
Yeah.
And kind of like, even though my brain was like, no, my body was like, no. And I'm just like, let's just try it and see what happens. And I was just like, whoa, I felt like I just went through like a whole intensive therapy weekend, like just through that one experience. And that's not even sexual at all.
Yeah.
So it's like, you can use your environment and things to really just like give you so much feedback about the way that you're interacting with the world around you.
Yeah, and expanding. And the thing is, you know, like you also knew that the people you were with were going to keep you safe. You had the harnesses on. You had all the stuff. So you weren't just like free climbing a boulder for the first second time, right? So like you took there are precautions. So
Yep.
people out there, if you want to get a
Yes, true. That's right.
you know, be safe. Like, I'm not just gonna fall off this thing and die. But with that is like, you're right. You know, when you said like, listen to your body, but you also have to understand your body's not always right, as well as your mind. Listen to your minds, listen to the voices that come up and things that come up for you. But again, your mind is also affected by the things that have happened, right? In your life that you may not have had control over. And so working on kind of reprogramming yourself to, not react in a fear-based way, right?
Yeah.
So that you have so you feel more empowered in your life, so that you get the things in your life. And if the way you're living your life is not serving you, and the way you're living your sexual life is not serving you, and you're like, I'm not happy and I'm not satisfied and all these things, then how you're going about it may need to shift.
Yes, 100%.
If you feel like, I'm so happy, I love just missionary sex and that's all I want, and I never want to masturbate, and I only like this one thing, and I'm just really happy about it, fine.
Yes, totally.
Yeah. Some people are like that, and they're just super, super happy with just very, very specific things. Great.
Yeah.
But I know many of you out there are not happy with everything. That most of you guys are slightly dissatisfied and are just dealing and content, right? Not even unhappy, but just content. And it's like, ask yourself, is that how you want to live your life? And this pandemic should really tell you about the quality, not only of the quality of your relationship with yourself, the quality of your relationship with others, with your partners, with your friendships, and the quality of your relationship with this world, right?
Yeah.
That is like what I've noticed for myself.
And these stories are so old. Like, they can be such old, deep stories that we almost don't even realize, where it's like, maybe it's manifesting in your sex life as you just feel discontent, or you feel like something is missing. And it's like, kind of going back to the rock yesterday, it was like, in my head, I already decided before I got there that I was not capable of doing it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I can't do it. I'm not strong enough. I can't do that. And that's like a very old thing for me, as to just like, oh, I'm not capable of doing that. Why would I embarrass myself in front of someone else? Come on, don't kid yourself. You can't do that. And then I was just like, whoa, I just like totally rewired this really, really old, like deep inner child story that I had, and just like proved it wrong. And like, it's not really related to sex, but it's totally related to sex, because now it's like, it just opens up all of these other channels and things where I'm just like, oh, I am fucking capable of doing that. Like, I can do that. I can do anything. Like, maybe maybe things aren't as scary as I thought they were. And so really just kind of knowing when to push your buttons and like try new things, and always honoring yourself as well. Like you said, if it doesn't feel good and you don't want to do it, then don't. We're not telling you by any means to do it, but know when to push yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, because I definitely think like we have all these limiting beliefs we have about ourselves that are old stories, right? We always, there's these stories that either come up because of how we grew up, where we grew up, how we were taught. And I think a big part of that self-discovery is asking yourself, is analyzing that story. Like, this is the what I call the lowercase truth we've told ourselves, right? Like, I can do this, but it's not the uppercase truth. It's not the actual truth. And so part of that journey is to stop and actually go, like, and to look at the stories that you're going by and see, does this story actually serve me? Like, why do I believe this story? Or why do I believe this belief? Like, I have this belief. Why is it there? And giving yourself time to like look at those deeply and clearly, so that you do make the choices in your life that serve you and help you get the goals you want, especially in a sexual capacity. All the stuff we talk about in these sexual capacities are all skills that can be taken into any other part of your life,
Yes,
right?
totally.
But what we see so much is like, there's so many times I see these, like, I see people who like are fucking doing so much in their life, right? They've got the job they want. They're fucking hustling. They got the family, whatever. They're doing all this stuff and they're go getting in society. They, you know, making all this money. They're doing all this. And then the one part of their life that they're so dissatisfied with is sex, sexuality, our own, you know, and it's because like, they somehow has separated that part. Like the skills you put into getting all those other things in your life is the same skills you use to get the sexual things in your life.
Yeah, and by healing your it's like by healing your sexuality, you're healing the rest of your life as well. And you're integrating the rest of your life as well. Even if it doesn't maybe make sense in the moment, like once you kind of start playing with these things, like miracles happen, things start to fall into place, and all of a sudden you're like, how the fuck is this happening? And you're like, oh, I'm just more integrated and like, you know, working on this part of myself, and it's this huge ripple effect. And maybe that goes into like erotic energy is like life force energy. And so it's kind of just this massive potential for transformation and change.
Totally, I agree. It is not separated, folks. It is all integrated. And when you work, you know, we are sexual beings, you know, and as human beings, as sexual beings, if we don't work on our own relationship with our sexuality to ourselves, you know, don't even take into other people, but just with yourself, then you can't expect to, like, first off, have a good relationship with yourself when it really comes down to it, but have a good relationship with other people, you know? And it's an ongoing journey, and it takes a lot of questions and mistakes, and, you know, but it's all skills we can build for ourselves if we go down, if we make an effort, there's so much resources now, right? For all of us to get here. Like Lenore and I didn't just get born and all of a sudden be these sexual awakened beings, right? We didn't like come out the womb and we're just like, bam, hot, sexy goddesses that got it all together, you know? Like, I think both of us relate because we've talked about our past with so much trauma and with sex. Like, it was a choice we made to help heal this part of ourselves because it was so important to us. You know, we may not have subconsciously, we may have not consciously realized how much we were trying to work, but subconsciously, I think there was a part of us that says, this is important. This thing about me is important, and I need to work through it, and I need to do what I can to work through it. And I think both of us have made an effort to like continue our education, reading books, listening to podcasts, going on courses, having conversations, exploring with ourselves. So it's like research, knowledge, and application, right? You got to do all of it to get to a better place. And we're still on this journey. Like you're just, even this quarantine time, you're like, man, I discovered all this shit about myself.
I'm still exploring new shit. Exactly.
And I am, you know, and I am too, you know, and like kind of tapping into like having conversations about part of my sexuality that I still sometimes have a shame around. You know, I have no shame around my kinkiness. I have no shame around my sadism, but there are some deep parts about myself that sometimes I think I'm supposed to be more sexual than I am because I'm like, I'm a sex worker. I'm a dom. This is what I do. And I sometimes subscribe to the story that I'm supposed to be as sexual as all my other friends who do this work. And the reality is I'm not. Like my type, my sexuality has always been this way. Like for a long time, I did consider myself, you know, either asexual, like sexuality comes very, is not based in my physical body for me. It's very cerebral for me. And so I need to put effort into turning on my mind, or else my body, like I rarely will just feel it in my body.
Yeah.
You know, like it's not this moment of like, oh, I'm horny physically. Like my
Mhm.
body, like it just doesn't do that, you know?
Yeah.
And it's been that way for a long time. And I'm not going to, I had shame around that of like, why aren't
Mhm.
you working right? Why aren't you working, you know? And
Yeah.
I've learned over the years, and I'm still working through this, is like,
Mhm.
I need to not, like, on the other side where people have sexual shame, I have like the other shame where I'm like, am I not sex positive, horny
I'm not
enough?
sexy enough? What the hell?
Like, am I, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like having to unpack that for myself and
Mhm.
understand that I'm so cerebral, and
Mhm.
sexuality comes out in my kinks, in my sadism.
Yes.
Like that for me, and that doesn't equate pussy wet turn on for me.
Yeah.
Like I don't necessarily need that part. What I need is my mind to be just like satiated with
Yeah.
weirdness, with,
Mhm.
you know, and when my mind is really satiated, I feel physically satiated too. And then
Mhm.
every, you know, once in a while, then there will be a physical part for me to like want
Yeah.
to express. And I honor that. But
Mhm.
working through kind of my own personal like shame and story of like, why don't you want to have an orgasm more? Why
Mhm.
don't you want to have this? And it's just like, but like, that's not where I am, you know?
Yeah, and through kind of through like playing with that relationship to yourself and your own pleasure, like then all of a sudden in relationships, it makes it so much easier because you're like, oh, I know this about myself already. Like, and
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that we don't have shame around these things, and we definitely do, but it's like, yeah, just getting that like really strong self connection with your own pleasure, how you like to be touched, how you don't like to be touched, like what turns you on, scenarios. Like I definitely identify with being a very mentally kinky person as well. And just like everything up, it's like, I'm like, dude, I'm always getting off on everything because it's all up here. And so
Yeah.
it's, yeah, I'm just so inspired by this conversation right now.
Yeah. There's so much to it. And it's like, and there is like, it's hard to like have these like fast rules for people or these generalized things. And I know so many people want that as
Yeah.
solutions, right? But it's so individual. And for me, like for me who works in this like super sex positive, all this stuff, like in my personal life, I actually just have to be careful with trying to think that my life needs to be like a certain way because of other
Yeah.
people. And like, how do I want to interact in a sexual relationship that honors me, myself, but also that I'm dissecting those things to really make sure I'm honoring myself, but also
Yeah.
to take into account and care with my partner who may not be as aligned, you know, not be the same way. And so
Yeah,
you
and
know,
being able
that,
to explain it to your partner and have them
yeah.
not feel weird about like, "Oh, is it me? Am I the problem?" Like,
Yeah. And also encourage his way of expressing himself. That's why I was like,
yeah.
babe, I love knowing when you're masturbating or whatever. You
Mhm.
know, please masturbate in this cup because I got to use this cum for a scene, but whatever. I know you have seen the teaser.
I have seen the freezer.
So like, you know, but like
Oh.
I like hearing that, you know, that he's not
Yeah.
reliant on us, but that we
Mhm.
can spend sexual time together, but that he's
Mhm.
so joyful. And then sometimes I want to participate in that without
Mhm.
needing, you know, and I think this is something I talked about a lot. Like I am not a big fan of penetrative sex. It,
Mhm.
it doesn't, it's not bad, but it's also not
Mhm.
great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's almost like, why do you know, I don't want to feel pressured to have penetrative sex because of what? Because society should say, you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I orgasm the way I orgasm. I like how the
Mhm.
way I like exploring other ways. I like, you
Mhm.
know, and being able to just have that conversation and also be okay with that, you
Yeah.
know, as well. But I've also done the work to ask myself, do I not like penetrative sex because it's based on like fear in my past? Or is it actually something that's in my body and myself and who I am now authentically that I don't enjoy penetrative sex, right?
Yeah.
And so, and not enjoy, but that I don't crave or want or really, that's not my top 3 things on my sexual expression list, right? And so I did the work to not just be like, oh, I don't like it and I don't like it, like
yes, exactly. Like you engaged with it, you learned, you communicated with it, you learned from it. Yeah.
And knew when I would want it, when I don't want it, and really got to understand like where it was coming from and why it's coming up and like all that stuff. And so I can say with my whole body and I can say with my whole mind that, penetrative sex is like number 4 on my list, It's not off my list, but it's not like high up in my list.
Yeah. So. And that feels like so freeing when you're just like comfortable with it and owning it and just like, and communicating it to your partner so they don't internalize it. It's just like,
and appreciate how they want to express themselves. So, but that's important, like on your own journey, right? Like a lot of that has been my own journey of knowing my body, knowing my own sexuality. And I think that's a big part of like this conversation, right? Is getting people to tap. This is such a really amazing opportunity to explore, to get creative, to try different things with yourself and see, open, think outside of the box and open yourself up to new, different types of personal experiences for yourself. And like, I think that's like the amazing thing. And I love how you were just saying all these things that you've been doing with yourself, which is awesome, right?
I'm like, hey, no time like the present to be as weird as possible.
Oh my God, I feel like it. I feel like there's definitely funny, weird things that I've been doing a lot by myself. Or even like, it really tests your own like relationship with yourself. Even if you're in a partnership, right? Like this has been testing a lot of people. And so, having those little rituals, some self-love rituals, self-care rituals, some sexual exploration rituals. So important. I think on top of
sitting with your demons.
Some of the things that you were saying, I think are really great of like just feeling your body, right? Feeling your body every morning. And, for those of you out there, a lot of people who work with me, especially who work on, moving past certain things in their life and really exploring their kinks. And when I work with couples is fantasy journals. Keep a fantasy journal. Write your fantasy down for you. Don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about how weird it gets. Don't worry about that. Like, write it for you. If you're ready and you want to share some of it, you can. But write it for you. Keep track of it. In a way, it's almost like goals you write down, right? Your mind to get creative and explore and get it down. And then let your mind continue with that. And you're going to really rev up those juices, and work them out and feel less shame, I think, too, when you kind of put it out there, right?
Because so much in our heads is just, oh man, I'm just like, I feel like I could just keep talking forever.
I know, we've got over an hour. So
I know. I'm like, and then
I'm gonna just open it up to any question people want to ask. I know we hadn't started the question thing, so if anybody's here, I do have a question here. I personally feel this. What are both of your opinions on the Jungarian, the theory of anima and animus? Well, thoughts? I would have to I haven't done that reading in a really long time. So it's been a while kind of going down on certain psychological,
I know. I'm like, if it gets too specific, I'm like, don't know if I remember exactly what that is, but
like psychological, like theories and houses of thinking. that I would have to kind of refresh my mind on it. That. So I might have to come back to you personally. And, you know, we can discuss.
Yeah, I do love playing with kind of the Jungian theory of like, the shadow self and the regular, I guess, conscious. Yeah, the conscious and the unconscious, I guess, is how, I don't know if that's the enemy and the animus, but yeah, just playing with the unconscious and just letting, and I think that like the fantasy journal is perfect, that as you kind of write these down, like you're making the unconscious conscious. Like you are playing with like, oh, now I wrote this down. Like, and that doesn't mean that like it's real. It doesn't mean that you have to do it. It doesn't mean anything other than you're just taking it out of your head and putting it on paper, which I feel like is why journaling is so powerful, because it allows us to kind of interact with ourselves in this way that like when we're stuck in our heads, we can't really do.
Yeah. So quick Google search. This is the male and female part of Jung's.
Okay.
The internal female, the internal male, that part of it, of like, the internal, like the subconscious female in males. So for me, like, I think it's kind of interesting, the unconscious masculine side of a woman and the anima, the unconscious feminine side. I feel like it doesn't have to be unconscious. Like, I think we should make it more conscious. I think seeing a separation between men and women, or male and female, or male traits and female traits, I think all of this is first off, I think they're all social constructs, right? Of like what's masculine and what's feminine, right? And I think we all have these parts of ourselves. And if we get to a place of like being aware of them and being okay with them, like that's the best thing. There are beautiful traits about, male identities, female identities, and the blending of it, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I love being a daddy, and I've identified as daddy, and I don't see daddy as necessarily a masculine thing. I mean, I play with the traditional ideas of daddy, but I also mix in, my feminine ideas of daddy,
Yeah. Yes.
So I don't really subscribe to traditional ideas of what daddy can be. But it is fun playing with like the traditional roles, which is a big part of kink, right? What we have in our society and flipping them up. Like, okay, somebody asked, do you feel the presence of a safe space is key to opening yourself up to overcoming fears?
Yes.
And then there was an added part to this. So I'm just, but especially when opening up to your partner about things you want to try but afraid to ask. What are your thoughts?
Okay. All right. So this is a little edgy.
Okay.
But so I think as humans, we don't have enough experience with rejection. And
I agree.
Yeah.
We talked about this.
Yes. Oh my God. Because now I have this like, we won't go into it now, but I have this like soft rejection kink that's like kind of coming up in my life that's been really interesting. And it's through this experience of being rejected. And the first time, like, because my kinks are so taboo, I'm used to, I had a lot of shame. I would hide it, and then it would kind of come out in a weird way. And then I kind of became very confident. I was like, I know the words. I know what I want. Like, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. And some people are like, yeah, that might be a little much for me. And I'm like, cool, fine, no problem. Like, it was just like, I feel like the first time is the most terrifying. And like, yes, does it hurt to get rejected when you're pouring out like your deepest, darkest kind of things? And I would say, like, especially if you're doing it with a new partner, it's like, what's the point? Or I mean, like, just put it out there, right? But if it's a long-term partner, someone you've had a already established relationship with, I think it is important to also be like, hey, I'm going to tell you something really, really vulnerable, and I really want you to hold space for this, like, even if it's not your thing, that's fine. But yeah, I definitely feel like the first time hurts the most, and then after that, it just is not. You're just like, oh yeah, okay, you're not into that. Cool. You just saved me a lot of time.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, resiliency, right?
Yeah, resiliency.
We can only build resiliency in a lot of ways by facing the thing we need to like build resiliency on. There are so many, like, we can practice resiliency in theory, work on the books, read the things, go to therapy and all this stuff. And we can like learn and practice resiliency in theory, but it doesn't really work until something happens where you actually have to become resilient to it, right? 100%. So like a lot of stuff can happen in theory. And so unfortunately, you kind of have to go through rejection. You kind of have to go through being vulnerable and maybe being hurt by it, right?
It is like it's kind of the shittiest answer, because it's like, you really just have to do the thing. Like, there's no way, there's no amount of rituals, there's no amount of healing, there's no amount of anything that's going to avoid doing the thing eventually that you're scared of.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, I think in ways you can practice that with other people. I think for some people, seeing a pro dom or seeing a sex coach, seeing a therapist where they can kind of practice and role play and get comfortable with their interests, their kinks, their sexuality, whatever, to a place where they're okay because they're expressing it, then it becomes a little easier to maybe take the next step of like, oh, maybe I will start telling people I'm dating that I'm into this thing, right?
Yeah.
And see how it goes. But the thing is, that fear is always going to be there, that possibility. And you have to be open to the possibility that you're going to get rejected, because you can't control other people.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. And sometimes there's not ever a truly safe enough space to express those things.
100%.
You can start it, but then eventually you're going to have to, there's going to be the risk, right? Eventually there will always be a risk. We have another question. How do you vet that people are compatible enough with you to engage these deeper ways of relating? How would you answer that, Lenore?
I'm like, I feel like definitely emotional maturity. Like this idea. Okay, well, I guess just through personal experience, right? Like when I started exploring my daddy girl fantasy, like I just fucking did it with anybody. It was like I was on FetLife. I was like, cool, you're a daddy. I don't know you. I'm turned on by this. Let's do it. And not so surprisingly, I was pretty much leaving every encounter like incredibly triggered, not in a good way, just like in a really bad space, because and it kind of goes back to that safe space, right? That is maybe not, we don't have total control over a truly safe space, but in this way that I felt like if I can create what feels like safety to me, have a connection with this person, feel like I can trust them on some level, then the experience is just so much more meaningful and so much more transformational. So yeah, how do you, vetting people is, I feel like that would be, and I guess the way that some tricks that I like to use for it is just kind of like, oh, well, I kind of have this weird thing that I'm into. It might be too weird for you. I don't know. And you're kind of like teasing them a little bit with it. And the people who are just like, and I would say most people are like, ooh, tell me. I want to know the weird thing. Nothing's too weird for me. I'm open-minded, like blah, blah, blah. And so then usually I can kind of like explaining my fantasy first, and then also just kind of engaging with like, what, have you ever done anything like this before? Do you have a desire to do something like this? Like, do you think it would make you, can you hold space for me in this situation as well?
Yeah. And I think, there's time, getting to know someone, getting to know them as friends, not rushing. Like if you know, time can be very helpful in really getting to know someone and building that trust. Can be a helpful thing in like, you know, revealing before you engage in these deeper ways. I think that, you know, deeper things can, you know, it's hard to create that deepness instantly with a lot of people, because the whole point of it being deep is that it's coming from some sort of deeper engagement with them, right? It's coming from some time spent, some getting to know them and all of that. So that's sort of a way where, you know, you will build the trust with someone if you take the steps to build that trust with them. And in some ways, like with some of these things we're talking about, like see a professional, you know,
someone 100%.
Yeah.
Because then, like you said, building that safety out of context, because so often when we're in relationships or with someone you know or you don't know, it's such a triggering space for both of you that I feel like seeing a coach, seeing a sex worker, seeing someone who can just take you out of the situation a little bit, but still kind of push your buttons in that way, like then you gain the confidence and like, oh, I know this is what I want. I know how I want it. Like I can explain it to somebody and know if they can hold space for that or not.
Yeah. There are a lot of professionals out there is like, this is what they do, is kind of help you get to a place where you can explore this stuff with someone in a deeper way, in an engaging way, and a safer way, and then hopefully help you build the courage and the skills to sort of bring it out and like maybe apply it to other parts of your life if you want to, you know, because some people need the separation. Some people, they're like, I don't really want this in my like personal relationships because I need someone I feel very, you know, I can feel very submissive to or something like that. And sometimes that's hard to do with your partner when you guys are like, what are we going to have for dinner? Or like, who's going to take out the dog, while like having a person that you can feel really be like, this person makes me feel really subby or whatever, really feels that can be very helpful. I do have one more question that we're going to put out before we end this. Do you recommend any kink friendly books on sexual self-discovery?
I'm like, I know a really good one is Come As You Are by Emily Nagasaki, I believe, but that's definitely more based off of women's sexuality, I would say. Let me think for a second. Do you have any?
For kink-friendly books on sexual self-discovery, well, I don't know if it's as specific as sexual self-discovery, but I think there's a lot of books out there around kink and other people's like views on it and how they go about things that can help inspire you to think about your sexuality a little differently. So, you know, one of the books that I've read, you know, when I started pro-doming, you know, was, you know, there was S&M 101, you know, which is like some technical things, more technical stuff. But then there was also like different kind of loving or something, different loving. And that had a lot of stories of people and couples about how they engage in BDSM. And so those are also like, I think just reading as many things as you can be very helpful. But one of the big things is like, you know, not just books, but there's so many podcasts out there too. And like going on, you know, let me bring up my podcast right now, my library of stuff. So my shows. So, you know, there's a podcast called Down for Whatever, which I've been on. And there is, you know, with Tina Horn's Why Are People Into That?
Oh, yes, that's great.
What covers a lot. I know that there are some sex ed ones. There are, you know, ones called Pillow Talk. Like there's just like lots of podcasts out there with people having conversations around sex and sexuality and people's personal stories, including all our old interviews and people in this industry and related to this industry who've talked about their kind of kink journey or their sexuality journey. So I think that helps hearing other people's stories. But there are a lot of books out there. You know, there's the new bottoming book, the new topping book. There, you know, so there's just like a handful that I just recommend reading. Even if it's bad, then you can just be like, okay, you know, I got maybe one thing out of it, right?
Yeah.
But there's no, I wouldn't say there's been a book that just covers everything, like anything, right? Like I read all types of, you know, mindfulness and Buddhism books from different, you know, different teachers and different writers and different people who have different takes on it to give myself a wider view of things.
Yeah. 100%.
So there's a lot out there. I'm going to, someone said this. Oh my God. You're the best Lenore Black interview. Wow. Yes, she is. So before we end this, you know, interview, if you would like to follow Lenore, work with her, please look below. Look below for the scrolling things down there. Also, this will be on YouTube if you want to rewatch it or send it out to any folks. So that will be up as well. And yeah, should be tonight, should be up. And for those of you who are new to our show or who have been with us for a long time, one thing that's very new is if you want to support our weekly broadcasts, the La Maison de Rouge has a Patreon that has membership rewards such as video phone calls with us or even private meetings. So go ahead and check it out below. And you know, we also have one that's like if you want to be a $10 patron a month, that is always helpful because, again, we do this out of the love of kink and community and knowledge and sexuality. So this is something everyone who participates in this does out of their own time and does not get paid for. So if you want to see these spaces and these conversations continue, please support as much as you can. Those are always important. And, you know, I want to thank our wonderful guest, Lenore. I miss you so much. And when you come back, we will have a little hang. But thank you again for being on. Thank you again for dropping some sex witch, you know, erotic coaching magic with us. And thank you all for joining us. And we'll see you next week. Again, every week, Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for any of you who are new and do not know that. So have a good night, everyone.
Bye.